Welcome to the podcast where we discuss health, health span, lifespan, and longevity. I'm Dr. Noor Gajraj. Okay, welcome to the podcast. Today we're going to talk about a very, very important subject, stress and resilience. Stress is very important. We're recognizing it as very high in the factors for health and longevity. I personally would say nutrition, exercise, stress, sleep, connection, and relationships. Dr. Sideroff has talked about a lot about relationships, better relationship with yourself, better relationship with others, and also a more defined purpose in life. So thanks, Dr. Sideroff. I'm really excited to have you. I've listened to your lecture and I've got your book, and I think this is one of the best books in its category because, a lot of books or a lot of lectures are just about, well, take a few deep breaths or some other things that don't really help. But your book, you've covered a lot of topics and you've got a lot of steps and practical advice. So, this book is excellent. So anyway, Dr. Sideroff is a internationally renowned psychologist, consultant, and associate professor at UCLA, who's established innovative training and treatment programs around the world. He has hosted summits on longevity, resilience, and leadership, and published pioneering research in brain and behavior. He's a thought leader, called on to speak on his groundbreaking approach to resilience, peak performance, and transformational psychology. His new book is The 9 Pillars of Resilience, The Proven Path to Master Stress, Slow Aging, and Increased Vitality. So thanks, Dr. Sideroff. Perhaps you could start off by telling us a little bit about your background, your interests, and your journey to write this book and why you wrote it.
Certainly. It's first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Uh, when I first got into psychology, I started out in brain research. I
Right.
was interested in where and how learning and memory take place in the brain. But then when I moved into clinical practice, I realized that people can be doing okay in their lives until the stress built up.
Right.
And when the stress built up, coping ability started to fall by the wayside. Well-being started to be challenged, and physical symptoms began to occur, sleep problems, etc. And so I realized that that was an important doorway into how a person functions and what may hold them back in terms of functioning at their best. And so that's why I focused in on stress. And what's interesting is when I started out back in doing this back in about 1979, 1980, I did my first executive workshop, and people came up to me afterward and was saying how it was eye-opening, how this is so important, how they were going to go out and follow a lot of the things that they found very useful in my talk. And a couple of months later, I would reach out to a few of them, and not a single one was actually had followed through. And that piece of information, how people were crying out for help with dealing with their stress, but yet had such resistance, struck me
Hmm.
because it indicated how difficult this issue is for most people.
Right.
And so I began to study what that's all about. And in fact, just recently, I published an article on what I call the four horsemen of chronic stress.
Right.
And essentially what I've learned is that we have a lot of ambivalence about stress, and for good reason. And there are structural factors that make it difficult for people to deal with stress and actually lead us to failure, starting with the fact that this is a survival mechanism, our stress response. And so we don't fool on a instinctual level. It's hard to control something that is designed over the evolutionary process of hundreds of thousands of years to be what it is. But here's the real issue. While our stress response has evolved over such eons to adapt perfectly to our environment,
Mhm.
we still have the same fight or flight mechanism of our hunter-gatherer ancestors. So while our society, our civilization, what we face in life day by day has changed exponentially, we still have that same old fight or flight pattern, which no longer fits our environment. And so my book is designed to help people recognize their resistance, realize that stress is not, in and of itself, is not bad. It helps mobilize us. It helps us deal with the challenges of life and of success. All of our all of our efforts towards success have been paired with stress, and our brains have put those two things together, making it more difficult to say, I'm not going to be stressed. So, what we need to do is find our stress sweet spot,
Right,
to find that balance point between engaging the stress response when it's appropriate
right.
and making sure that other times we go into the recovery phase, because that's the goal, is to be in a place of balance.
Yeah, that's right. Well, let's talk about some of these methods. We're going to jump around a little bit. So, I think it is difficult. I think a lot of people know that um, they're stressed and they're wondering, how am I going to get my stress levels down? They've got kids, they're not sleeping very well, they've got work demands, financial insecurities, and the kind of advice they get is, well, do some meditation, yoga, deep breathing exercises, but I don't really think that has enough impact. That's why I'm interested in your book. So I think a lot of it is to do with thinking patterns, behaviors, and then trying to reprogram the brain. Luckily, the brain can be reprogrammed to think differently. So in that situation, somebody comes and says, "I'm very stressed. How do I get my stress levels down?" Um, how would you approach that?
Well, first of all, my goal is to give them a sense that doing that is actually possible.
Right,
That they can start out by believing that there is a way for them to handle stress better.
right,
So that's the first thing. And the beginning step is really what I refer to as a growth mindset.
right,
And that means that you're here, but there is a way to get over to here.
right,
My my book and my model, The Nine Pillars of Resilience, is a comprehensive approach to optimal functioning. I've taken everything into consideration, and it's in that model. But people get the next step is that people feel overwhelmed. As you just said, all the different areas of our lives where we got this going on, we got this going on. And that's why I created this notion of the path. Those goals seem way, way down the road, and people can get discouraged. People can get overwhelmed by it. But what I tell them is the path leading there is alongside you every moment of every day. And all you have to do is take a few steps that put you onto the path, and that helps you do the best you can do today. And once you realize you're doing the best you can do today, you could let go of all the other things that you feel you should be doing or that you're not doing. Because what I find with people is they'll actually be doing some things that are helpful, but they will immediately look at all the things that they're not doing and feel like they're not doing enough, and they'll start getting down on themselves, which leads me to the next step in this process, which is the first pillar of which is our relationship with ourselves.
Right.
And here's the next place where a lot of people get stuck, and that's the way we treat ourselves. We typically are overly hard on ourselves. We make a mistake, we can beat ourselves up for mistakes. We feel we should be doing better than we are. And so all of these lead to low self-esteem. They lead to anxiety. They lead to a feeling like I'm not going to be able to do it. And the next step here is teaching them a healthy relationship with themselves. This is the first pillar. And what I mean by that is identifying, we all grow up learning the lessons of childhood. And for most of us, those are negative lessons.
Yeah.
We're not good enough. We're not okay. We should be doing as well as Joe or Jane. And our internal guiding place that we come from is based on these typically negative messages of not being good enough. And that's how we treat ourselves. We've internalized that, and that's the voice we hear 24/7. So I give people a different model of an internal voice for a healthier relationship with ourselves. And
Right.
that internal model of a healthy internal voice, a healthy internal parent, if you will,
Hmm.
comes from a place of love, compassion, acceptance, support, care, and joy.
Right.
The key there is acceptance. Most of the time, wherever we are in life, we feel we should be further along. I should have done that better. I shouldn't have made that mistake. And
Yeah.
all of these ways that we put ourselves down for being where we are.
Right.
And so I tell people that the laws of physics say you can be in only one place at one time.
Right.
And if this is where you're at,
Yeah.
it's time to simply accept that this
Hmm.
is where you're at. It doesn't mean you like it. It's simply this is reality. And every time that you say, I should have done better, you're basically telling yourself that there's something wrong with me, that I'm not doing better in life. Instead, I tell people, start with accepting where you're at. This is
Yeah.
being this is being good to yourself. In fact, wherever you want to get to, the fastest way of getting there is by first accepting I'm here.
Hmm.
Because then you're not working against yourself. You're not creating resistance by feeling I'm not good enough or I should be better. Here's where we begin, accept it, and we can move on from there. So the healthy internal parent, the healthy internal voice is a key element to resilience. And every time that we have a problem, we have an issue, I suggest we look to listen to the message we're giving ourselves.
Hmm.
So, for example, you're going into a meeting with people. The message you may be giving yourself is, oh, I might make a mistake, or am I going to do it well enough, or are those people going to judge me? Those are messages from a negative internal voice. In that moment, stop, time out, and call on a healthy internal parent based on the qualities that I just gave you.
Yeah.
That voice might say, hey, look at all of your successes. You are good enough. Or it may say that um, people may judge you really well, not poorly. In
Hmm.
other words, it would be a more positive message, and that can reduce the anxiety you have as you walk into that meeting, as an example. So, anytime that you struggle, you're having difficulty, check in with what the message is you're giving yourself, take a time out, and then imagine a healthier internal parent speaking,
Hmm.
and then use that for greater results.
Yeah. Yeah, we have this internal critic, and they say, if we said the same things to somebody else, they'd be very angry, but we keep telling ourselves these things. And, what occurs to me, they are our own thoughts. So if we go into that meeting, oh, I'm going to do badly in this meeting. I mean, we're going to believe it because there are thoughts. And what I say, and I think you're going to touch on this, that we have to challenge these negative thoughts. And I say, put these thoughts in a court of law under oath. And, do you really think that's going to happen? Why? What is your evidence for that? So I think that's, really good, sort of challenging our assumptions. A lot of these things are not going to happen. Then they say like
Another
90% of,
another way of thinking about it is that with ourselves, we're subjective. Uh, and so if you're struggling with a mistake, for example, and you're beating yourself up about it, imagine somebody that you love coming to
yeah.
you and telling you about their that same mistake. What
Mhm.
would you say to them? For most of us, we would be much more accepting, much more caring, giving them a much more objective perspective, putting that better into a larger context of their lives. And so that's another tool that I suggest to people is that they imagine what's happening to them, happening to somebody that they love, and they
Yeah.
would come up with a very different perspective, one similar to if they treated themselves from this positive internal voice.
Anyway, you said something that strikes me, the acceptance is very important. And then a lot of people talk about, oh, I should have done that, or I should be this. And one of my phrases is, you're shoulding on yourself because there's really no should. It's just what happens and what doesn't happen. So, I mean, that's a good one. So, pillar number one, relationship with self. And then pillar number two is relationship with others. And I think, and everybody would agree, good relationships are key. I mean, I have a good marriage, a good relationship, and that's got a lot to do with my health, especially my mental health. But maybe talk about relationships with others and how that's important.
Yeah, so part of the way of thinking about this is we are in environments that could be stressful or they could be supportive.
Hmm.
Now, there's some environments that you can't choose. You're working in a particular place and that's your livelihood. You're stuck in that environment, and therefore, resilience is about the best way of handling toxicity or other problems and stresses in that environment. But when it comes to relationships, you want to maximize your time with relationships that are supportive, caring, and loving, and you want to minimize your time with relationships where you may feel more defensive, judged, um, like you're walking on eggshells.
Hmm.
Because we have enough stress in our lives that we can't avoid, that we should not be putting ourselves into other environments that we can avoid.
Hmm.
Because if you're in a relationship with a friend who's loving, you let down your guard
Hmm.
and you take in positivity,
Right.
and that actually supports resilience.
Hmm.
If you're in a relationship with someone who you may not feel so comfortable with, you have to have your guard up, maybe they're judgmental or critical, that's an environment that's actually stressful and not an opportunity to recover.
Hmm.
So it's about discriminating healthy versus non-healthy relationships, maximizing your time with those relationships that are supportive and minimizing those that are stressful.
Yeah. I always think of it as is the relationship an asset or a liability? Now, if you're in a relationship which is a liability, I think you have to think twice. And you've mentioned love, that's a big one. Everybody's got their uh, definition, and I think one of it is acceptance. When your other people in your life accept you, and that's the way they are. I mean, that's a very powerful thing. We don't want to be judged, do we? And they say you can't judge and love someone at the same time.
Well, we don't want to be judged, and where that begins is stopping our own judgments of ourselves and being more accepting of ourselves.
That's right. Pillar number three, relationship with something greater. And that's definitely people are knowing about that. There's the Blue Zone Project where having a purpose is important. They say those people in those areas having a purpose, something to get up for in the morning. So again, that's another good one, isn't it?
Yes, and it's my pillar number three, relationship with something greater, is what connects us to the larger world, the larger community, so we don't feel isolated. But it's also about finding meaning and purpose in your life, and it could also be your spirituality that
Hmm.
makes those connections.
Mm. Yes, that's a good one. And yeah, purpose, that could be um, something greater, could be God or however you represent that. Um, yeah, that one's important. They're all important actually. That's why I like this book. Then you talk about physical balance and mastery. What's that all about?
So this is really, when people talk about stress management, this is really at the heart of what they're talking about, and that means having the two having the two branches of your nervous system, the sympathetic activating branch and the parasympathetic recovery branch, in balance.
Right.
So it means practicing some form of meditation, relaxation, biofeedback, something that counters all the activations from all the stresses in your day, in your life. It's about getting a good night's sleep. It's
Yeah.
it's about um, having a response that's in proportion to the type of stress you're encountering.
Mm.
So a lot of times we could be sitting and we could be stressed because we have a time pressure and our body is getting prepared for fighting or flight, running from the danger. So here you want to literally learn to have a what I call a calm focus. It's what I teach peak performing athletes. We don't
Yeah.
have to mobilize our entire bodies when we're sitting down at a computer and doing some work on a computer. So that's physical balance and mastery.
Excellent. Pillar number five, thinking and mental balance.
So we began our conversation talking about a growth mindset.
Yeah.
It's really about how we have control over our thinking rather than our thinking having control over us. So, for example, some people may have a tendency to look for what can go wrong. They may start the day,
Yeah.
what's going to go wrong in my day? And they're already triggering their stress response. It's about noticing this, and I recommend people have a positive approach, thinking
Hmm.
about what can go right. We don't ignore potential dangers, but once we figure out how we'll deal with them, we want to let go of that and focus on the positive potentials. So that's, uh, you know, mental balance and mastery is also being able to let go of negative thoughts rather than having them keep going around and around in our head. And one way of doing that is to shift into the more positive.
Number six, emotional balance and mastery. So I always think of emotions as being able to steer our emotions, and it's like a car, steer our emotions and use the brakes. So how about that? How do we achieve emotional balance?
Well, it's about number one, being aware of what feelings we're carrying, we have.
Yeah.
A lot of times we'll deal with a person, a situation, and we walk away and we're carrying an emotion from that, maybe a little resentment, a little upset, a little anger. Um, and we just ignore that. We just keep moving on to the next thing in our lives without realizing that these feelings don't go away on their own. They need to be addressed.
Right.
And so as a result, we are carrying all kinds of what I refer to as unfinished emotional business, feelings that we can be carrying from yesterday or even from our childhood,
Mm-hmm.
where we're still holding either anger at a parent or sadness, and sadness about something that we didn't get as a child.
Hmm.
These feelings unconsciously drive our behavior. The person who's looking for more and more money when they have enough, they're trying to fill an emotional hole that will never get filled by more money, more success, more conquests.
Hmm.
Um, there's that emptiness that needs to be addressed. And the feelings that we have in our bodies, uh, we're not able to just hold them in our heads. Our
Right.
bodies literally hold in
Yeah.
the activation of those emotions,
Right.
which impairs the flow of energy in our body and actually interferes with us experiencing joy.
Yeah.
So we need to be paying attention to feelings that we're carrying and finding ways to resolve them, expressing and letting go of them.
That's right. So, yeah, it's interesting the way that we feel emotions because a lot of it is physical sensation, isn't it? When you feel depressed, you get this feeling of doom in your chest, right? Well, at least I do. And then when you're anxious, your body feels, it's racing and everything. Now, I've
Well,
heard that you should,
let me just say that to some extent, what depression is literally the depressing of other feelings.
yeah.
So you're numbing yourself or trying to numb yourself.
Hmm.
So a lot of depression can be addressed by looking at the emotions that you're depressing or pushing down,
Hmm.
finding some way of getting them out, and finding that there's less depression.
Yeah. I think one of the best things for anxiety or other negative emotions is to talk to someone, as you've mentioned, because, you're getting out of your own brain where, you're catastrophizing and getting into these negative patterns. And then, you talk to someone and say, oh, things are not too bad. What about this? What about that? So I think talking to somebody can be very therapeutic. So I like that one.
Absolutely.
Now, presence. This is another big one. I'm assuming you mean living in the present moment. Would that be right?
Living in the present moment, absolutely. And there's two parts to presence. One is being aware of the environment and what you're experiencing, but there's another presence, which is what we project out into the world, our presence, the energy that we express out into the world.
Hmm.
It could be inviting,
Yeah.
or it could be off-putting.
Mm, that's right. Flexibility. What does that mean?
There's different aspects of flexibility. We all have goals, and then there are always obstacles in the way of those goals.
Right.
Flexibility is being able to make adjustments in your path toward the goal or adjustments in the goal to have them more easily achieved when there are obstacles in the way. But flexibility is also about being able to put yourself in different perspectives so you see a situation from multiple angles.
Hmm.
It could be putting yourself in other people's shoes to experience life from how they see it, which enhances your ability to handle situations better.
Right. And then finally, pillar number nine is the ability to get things done. Maybe say a few words about that.
Right. So nine is I call power, and I
Right.
define that as the ability to get things done. So this is about being tolerant of discomfort,
Yeah.
because a lot of times when we're facing a challenge, when we're trying to reach a certain goal, it's going to be uncomfortable. It may be scary, it may be
Hmm.
difficult, but it's being persistent and willing to engage in something even if you have some fear.
Hmm.
So to me, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is being willing to take action in the face of fear.
Absolutely. Well, we've just scratched the surface, and I've read a few books on stress, and this is by far the best one. Um,
Thank you.
So yeah, I want to encourage the listeners here if you want to understand stress and have practical ways to deal with it, this is a must. And stress is a killer. Actually, I was reading something. There was a Finnish paper which said that chronic stress can decrease your life expectancy by about 3 years. I think that's probably more than that. If you look at stress in cardiovascular disease, I mean, that's a big one. So I think stress is a killer. Why wouldn't you try and understand it better and manage it better? So I want to congratulate you on this book and also thank you very much for coming in and talking about it. And as I say, we've just scratched the surface. So um, I would really encourage my listeners to go out and get it. They won't regret it.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And one of the things that was my goal in writing the book is not just to give people information, but to get results.
Yeah.
So it's written in a way that people will stay with it, will
Hmm.
not be overwhelmed, and can keep coming back to it. If they, as I say, fall off the path, they can get back onto the path.
Absolutely. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and
Thank you.
thanks again for being generous enough to come on this podcast.
My pleasure.
Please subscribe to my channel and read my new book, 100 Pathways to Longevity. Add 25 years to your life, available on Amazon.